Missouri. And Emily, I want to ask you quickly. This is a race where we've seen a lot of money poured in by super PACs. I think St. Louis Dispatch reporting $43 million so far from the two parties' campaigns. To what degree is that representative of what we're seeing? This is a big money election, of course.
Yeah, the Senate races, when it comes down to the end, that's when you start to see like that real money get poured in.
After the election, we'll get a full account.
Exactly. That's when we start to see that really big money start to come in. And that actually hasn't been an exception in Missouri for any of Claire McCaskill's races. There's always been a lot of money in them. Where we do start to see it being effective for those late-breaking voters, that outside money is where those real hard negative ads come in. And that is what I think. Look, I think that the outside money, I think the candidate are reflecting on the issues that are hitting the core for Republican voters. We know that for Democrats and for independents, the top two issues in every race are health care and the economy. When you start to get to the hardcore Republican base that Republicans are really trying to get out, it's immigration, which is really a code for othering,
sure.
Right? Like if they had something strong to run on, they would run on that. They don't. So that is what they're running on. But so that's where that big money really comes into if they can just scare enough voters into voting Republican.
All right, I want to turn our attention now to Georgia. Another big race we're following is the race for governor in that state. In recent days, Democrat Stacey Abrams has been joined on the campaign trail, as we were discussing, by Oprah and President Obama. Were she to win, Abrams would be this country's first black female governor. Her opponent is Republican Brian Kemp, Georgia's Secretary of State, and the race there is still neck and neck. Beth Fooey joins us now from Atlanta, Georgia. She's MSNBC's senior political editor. And I want to start with some tape here, if I could, of the President of the United States, Beth, talking about Stacey Abrams. He's been casting a lot of doubt on her qualifications. Let's take a listen to what the president had to say.
She is not qualified to be the governor of Georgia. She's not qualified. And Georgia is a great state. It's a great state. Take a look at her past, take a look at her history, take a look at what she wants to do and what she has in mind for the state. That state will be in big trouble very quickly. And the people of Georgia don't want that.
Beth, help us analyze that. Went to Spelman College, University of Texas for a graduate degree, Yale Law School for her law degree. What's he talking about? What's the president talk about, and what are voters saying about the rhetoric the president's using about Stacey Abrams' qualifications?
Yeah, and we're bound to hear more of that today, of course, David, because he's coming here this afternoon to rally for Brian Kemp, the Republican. They're going to be in Macon, Georgia this afternoon, and maybe he'll elaborate a little bit on what he means by what he's saying about Stacey Abrams. Yale Law School, the same law school where his hand-picked Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh went. So pretty bizarre language there, and I imagine we'll hear more about it when he speaks to supporters at that big rally. Now, this race has really turned into sort of a proxy battle between New South and Old South. Of course, this is, very red Georgia. Typically, it's been very conservative. But keep in mind, President Trump only won this state by 5 percentage points in 2016. That's a lot closer of a margin than we saw in Ohio, which is, of course, typically considered much more of a swing state. So things do appear to be changing here in Georgia. And somebody like a Stacey Abrams, a progressive Democrat, could actually pull it off. As you said, this is a very tight race, pretty much within the margin of errors. And President Trump really has sort of put a lot of stock into Brian Kemp. This is not one of those, races where you've got a competitive situation in Georgia. As most of the states he's going to, it's all about balance of power. This is simply about this Georgia governor's race. Brian Kemp very much sort of in the Trumpian mold on issues like immigration, issues. He's a Secretary of State, and he's been criticized for using the power of his office to purge minorities off the ballot. So it's the South, David. Issues of race, immigration, never far from the surface. Unfortunately, a robocall was put into the state on Friday, very racist, anti-Semitic, apparently by a white nationalist group against Stacey Abrams. Both candidates condemning that racist robocall. But frankly, it is just something that is kind of in the fabric of a Southern campaign. And even though this may be a turning point for the South, and they're ready to elect a progressive black woman governor, there's many ghosts that are always here too, David.
All right, Beth, Alexa McCammon from Axios has a question for you.
Hey, Beth. So unlike the other places where President Trump is visiting before the midterms, Macon, Georgia, which includes Bibb County, voted for Hillary Clinton by 21 points over Trump in 2016. I'm curious what you're hearing on the ground in terms of how popular or unpopular President Trump is in Macon, and whether or not you think Macon will be crucial to Stacey Abrams' victory.
Well, look, like every other red state, there's lots and lots of blue dots, and it's more urban areas that tend to be supportive of Democrats. Macon is one of the bigger cities in Georgia, so not surprising. It has a Democratic tilt to it, but it still is sort of out of the Atlanta metropolitan area. I mean, the vast majority of the more sort of diverse, progressive part of the state is Atlanta and its suburbs. Macon is more out there, but you're right. It is an unusual place for him to choose to come, since it was a place that supported Hillary Clinton. But again, this is all about getting that statewide media attention. It's going to be a very well-attended rally. He is still very, very popular with a lot of voters here, and he is hoping to transfer a lot of that popularity onto Brian Kemp, who is really much in Trump's model.
Kevin's really getting here as well. You've picked up a donut. You're getting serious.
Beth, you know, in Arizona, for example, Kyrsten Sinema is not even saying she's a Democrat in her ads. And Senator McCaskill, in the fight of her political life in Missouri, also going on Fox and saying that she has some centrist views on immigration. But then you go into the South and into the heart of Georgia, and you have Stacey Abrams running as a progressive. What is her pitch to independent voters, or is her campaign strategy get out the base of the Democratic coalition?
Well, that is certainly her strategy. She has believed right from the beginning that she can win this race if she encourages folks to come to the polls who've never voted before but are inspired by her as potentially the first black woman governor of Georgia. But, you know, she has been a member of the state legislature for many years and has won lots of bipartisan praise for being pretty independent and working very well with Republicans. I saw her the other night at the Obama rally, and she's talking about the military. She's talking about first responders. She's talking about church and faith. Her parents are pastors. So she really can be a very sort of centrist person, as well as a progressive in terms of her issues orientation. So she has a long track record here in politics in Georgia. People know her, and even though she is really hitting those progressive issues hard and hoping to inspire people to come out to vote who haven't voted before, she does have a record of working across the aisle.
Beth Fooey, our senior politics editor in Atlanta. She's got to make her way to Macon. Beth, thank you very much for the time this morning. Appreciate it. And I just want to spend the next couple of minutes here talking about early voting, maybe in the context of Georgia. Talk about voting there. Generally, 2+ million people have cast votes in Georgia already. And I was struck, Gabe, by what Sherilyn Ifill of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund said yesterday, that after this decision on voting rights in Georgia, Brian Kemp's supposed to have his hands full.
Yeah.
He has a lot to do, a lot to accomplish, a lot of boxes to check here in his day job as Secretary of State of Georgia, to make sure that folks can vote fairly on Tuesday. Your reaction to that side of this election in Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, you know, one thing I was just thinking about listening to the exchange there was that, you know, Trump is in many ways running as the most sort of avidly pro sort of the old South type of candidate. And if you look at the elections we've had in the off years, we had Doug Jones, a Democrat, win in Alabama. We had Ralph Northam win in Virginia, which is, you know, generally outside of the northern suburbs. It's a very southern cultured state. And yet now we have Stacey Abrams about to win possibly in Georgia. So to me, what's striking is we're in the most kind of old South style rhetoric when it comes to national politics. But in the South itself, we're seeing Democrats pick up seats that they, been decades since they've held.
And that's the difference between Stacey Abrams and Kyrsten Sinema, and Stacey Abrams and, respectfully, Congressman Beto O'Rourke, is that she's running as a progressive in a conservative state. If she is to win on Tuesday night, and there's no question that she will be the new star of the Democratic Party.
But interestingly, you know who else is running as a progressive in the South is Andrew Gillum, running for governor in Florida. So maybe that is part of the construct. Maybe it's a governor message, and maybe it is part of like the new versus old. I mean, I think it's interesting you talk about, Trump running as an old style Southern candidate. I wonder if that really just means that he's just running as like a big racist, which is like kind of what I think. I do wonder how much that penetrates, both with the message and with the alignment of the white nationalists, both in the messaging. They can try to push themselves away from it, but it's essentially their message. But the fact that Brian Kemp is Secretary of State, purging people off the voter rolls for his own election, I just wonder, I don't know, I wonder how much that's penetrating on the ground, because that does feel real deep in that southern race.
And the role that he would play if we don't get a simple majority at the end of Election Day on Tuesday.